I'm honored to speak today on behalf of the BC Civil Liberties Association, which was formed 62 years ago after some people of conscience came together in response to gross violations of human rights by police at that time. And as we are hearing today, police overreach is sadly not a historic feature, but still a cornerstone of our state apparatus. I want to start by acknowledging that there is a severe and unprecedented movement across all sectors of our society to silence and crush any dissent regarding Canada's support for Israel right now. This anti-Palestinian sentiment is pervasive amongst government officials and the media, and unfortunately has infected our law enforcement bodies as well. The policing of the peaceful protest on May 31st in Vancouver is part of a pattern of a very aggressive and discriminatory policing that's been occurring since last October. This is a strategic incapacitation which is facilitated by vast resources, and it's intended to intimidate and silence those who threaten the political order. The BCCLA will be filing a policy complaint with the VPD's Civilian Oversight Board about what happened at the protest. We are very concerned about the excessive use of force, that a member of the VPD that is already subject to a complaint was part of the VPD response, and about the police surveillance of pro-Palestinian protesters. We at the BCCLA were horrified to see how violent the Vancouver police were in response to the peaceful protesters on May 31st. From the videos we've seen and the people on site that we've spoken with, the people who've been criminalized, it's clear to us that excessive force was used. Policing is supposed to be politically neutral. The VPD and its Civilian Oversight Board have a duty to provide equitable policing and to ensure that all members deliver their services impartially and in a manner that upholds human rights and without discrimination. Earlier this year, we filed a complaint with the Office of the Police Complaint Commissioner after having witnessed a member of the VPD on duty with an Israeli flag on his uniform. According to our records, this member wore this patch, which is against VPD policy, for months on end. In our complaint, we allege that this overt display of support for a foreign state was an inflammatory political act, and that it weakened public trust in impartial policing. To our knowledge, the complaint is still under investigation. What is astonishing to us, however, and likely mind-boggling to any reasonable person, is that this very officer was dispatched to the protests at City Hall on May 14th and at the protest that we're talking about today on May 31st, and likely many others. It is extremely provocative and confrontational to send an officer that is so politically biased that they were willing to violate their own policy for months on end, to send them to use violence and to criminalize members of our community who are simply espousing opposing or different political values. My final point today is about the level of surveillance being used against people expressing pro-Palestinian views in Vancouver, but also across Canada. VPD Chief Constable Palmer said in a statement on October that the VPD is working closely with public safety, intelligence, and counterterrorism partners locally, nationally, and internationally. We at the BCCLA have reason to be very concerned that the police have gone overboard in its surveillance of Palestinian advocates and their allies. And I can even say, after having participated in so many press conferences in Vancouver about policing, this is the first one that I've ever noticed that we're being surveilled in real time. For example, the police have used drones at almost every rally, despite this being against their own policies and procedures. Page 497 of the regulation manual, available online to all of us, specifies that restrictions on VPD members' use of drones In the restrictions, it's very clear that, and this is verbatim, flights will not be conducted for surveillance purposes. However, they may be used in exigent circumstances where there's an imminent risk to life or safety, or where prior judicial authorization is so authorized. Permission must be obtained from the duty officer or designate in those circumstances. It further stipulates, and again verbatim, flights will not be conducted for the purpose of recording and/or identifying members of the public involved in peaceful protests or demonstrations. We have also witnessed the police doing surveillance with smartphones at these demonstrations. This is very intimidating. It's invasive to our privacy. It undermines principles of privacy, free assembly, and expression. It is simply unacceptable in a free, democratic society, which Canada and Vancouver purport to be. We call upon the VPD to assure the public that it is not using drones or other video recording devices at protests or at press conferences for surveillance purposes. The VPD should provide a full accounting to the public of why the disproportionate surveillance has occurred to date and notify any specific individuals about the extent to which their personally identifying information has been shared with other agencies or even shared beyond the borders of Canada. To summarize, the public should be outraged that so many resources are being used to surveil and repress one of the largest mass movements in years. The BCCLA will be filing a police complaint about excessive force used at the protest on May 31st and the ongoing surveillance of people attending such rallies. Protesters asking for ceasefires and arms embargoes are not terrorists by any stretch of the imagination. These are people using baby clothes to express their grief and to call attention to Canada's foreign policy that they oppose. It is well past time that our state and its law enforcement agencies like the VPD cease to treat them as enemies. Everyone deserves to be equally safe in Vancouver, no matter what our political views may be.